Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. My name is Sal Catalano, and I will be your host today to tell you about Sage Intacct Planning for the nonprofit industry. Can I just make sure that someone, Craig, can you hear me? I want to make sure that everyone's hearing me.
Loud and clear.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be reviewing Sage Intacct Planning for the nonprofit industry. We're going to talk about giving you an overview of the planning tool. We're going to talk about the financial planning and analysis, which is where this tool really takes budgeting to the next level. And then we'll go into a demo. I have a few colleagues that will be monitoring the chat and questions. So please feel free to ask your questions and we'll do our best to get to them during the webinar. But of course, if there's anything that we need to follow up on, we will do that as well. Okay. All right, well, my motto has always been, if we live, we plan. So with Sage Intacct Planning, you have the tool that'll help you get started quickly. So what is Sage Intacct Planning? Sage Intacct Planning is a cloud-based planning solution that eliminates the reliance on uncontrolled, inflexible, unsecure spreadsheets and replaces them with a real-time single source of truth for agile and confident decision-making. A lot of our customers are using this to streamline their annual planning process and complement that with monthly forecasting, having access to what-if scenarios at their fingertips, create driver-based plans with details that can go down to the employee level, get access to reporting and analysis, all while being connected to your Sage Intacct core financials. Our core features revolve around being able to save you a lot of time, to be agile, and allow you to move quickly to make changes as your company grows or simply respond to any market changes. For example, as a nonprofit, you may get a new grant. Imagine how easy it would be to create a scenario that includes the new funding and provide you with the information on staffing requirements or other resources. Or what if you're at risk for losing a grant? You can simply create a scenario and see in real time how those changes will affect the budget. Another core feature is that you can always trust the numbers. You can feel confident that numbers are rolling up correctly without having to worry about whether there are any mistakes in the formula of your Excel document. In my prior professional life, I spent over a decade in the finance department of various nonprofits, and I must admit that I sometimes used to spend more time footing and checking my formulas than actually creating budgets. It happened only once where one of my formulas became corrupted because I shared the budget with a program director and he inadvertently changed something that threw off all my calculations. It was a nightmare. You know, I think most of you can relate to how we guard our Excel spreadsheets. My favorite feature is to be able to collaborate in real time with program directors, department heads, and other budget stakeholders. Imagine having the right people access Sage Intacct Planning and make changes, provide supporting details, roll up those numbers to the appropriate categories, then take those numbers and bring them back into the general ledger for budget to actual analysis. I remember my finance team used to spend a couple of hours a week communicating with program directors and managers, providing them with program and fund balances, when this data could have been available through a dashboard. Sage Intacct Planning is easy to use. Whether your stakeholders have a strong financial background or not, they can participate and be responsible for how they run their budgets. These features will truly take the accountant role and elevate it to a more proactive approach to financial planning and analysis. You're no longer working on your budget only during budget season. With Sage Intacct Planning, you can devote a few hours a month and be ready to make changes quickly and easily. When we talk about what sets Sage Intacct Planning apart from any other planning software, we lead with these 4 items: self-discoverable, connected, powerful, and collaborative. What we mean by self-discoverable is the ease of setup and use. Typical planning and budgeting users want a tool that is easy to deploy. The intuitive and user-friendly tools are designed to be fully managed by the finance end user with no need for IT or admins to ever get involved. The connected item speaks to the user-friendly planning wizard, which provides intelligent mapping and syncs with your Sage Intacct core financials. If your organization does not have a dedicated financial planning and analysis resource, these functions are being carried out by the controller and finance managers. The bi-directional integration between Sage Intacct Planning and your general Sage Intacct core financials means that you can make a change to a scenario and quickly and easily merge that scenario back into your Sage Intacct core financials. The powerful driver-based modeling, what-if scenarios, and rolling forecasts let you see the impact of your decisions immediately. Imagine being in a budget meeting and being able to update and create what-if scenarios on the fly. Think about how quickly any decision can be made if the data that supports your assumptions is updated in real time where everyone can see the results immediately. The collaborative nature of the tool allows you to engage with the right people, the right data at the right time. I like to add a fifth item to this to mention its affordability. You get world-class planning functionality software that is priced 50% lower than most competitors. If you think about how much time is spent on budgeting and planning, this will pay for itself. Not having to be concerned with errors that are inherent with Excel, for example, or being approached by the CEO or board about making a small change in assumption revolutionizes the financial planning and analysis process. When we talk about the connection between Sage Intacct Planning and Sage Intacct core financials, we have what we call a bidirectional integration, meaning information flows from either Sage Intacct Planning into your core or from the Sage Intacct core into the planning tool. It's important to note that the integration is initiated through the planning tool in either case. I'll show you how that works when we go into the demo. Imagine, if you will, creating a budget from scratch where we use the data from a given period that is in your Sage Intacct core financials, take that data and make changes to it, share it with other key stakeholders, and quickly and easily have a budget. As you can see on this slide, whatever information that exists in your core financial general ledger, you'll have the opportunity to enter budgets on those dimensions. Keep in mind that if there are accounts in Sage Intacct core that are not in the planning tool, you will automatically be prompted during the import process to map these new items. And the export function works similarly to the import. You'll see that when you can create a new budget with all of the accounts and dimensions that are mapped appropriately. You also have the option of mapping any new dimensions that don't exist in your general ledger. For example, if you want a budget on a line item that doesn't exist, just like in the import function, you'll automatically be prompted to map those during the export process. Okay. Now, when we talk about financial planning and analysis, this is the planning tool, and what stands out is that there's a crucial element. When I was a CFO and I was using Excel to manage my budgets, we typically spent 2 to 3 months on creating a budget for the following fiscal year. Once that budget was approved, we spent the remainder of the year just looking at the budget to actual analysis. With this added FP&A element, we're providing the finance team with tools that can help with strategic planning, forecasting, and analysis. And it serves as a link between the organization's overall strategy, its financial resources, and its operational execution. Okay. The financial planning and analysis tool improves visibility by helping your organization understand critical financial issues and opportunities. It helps you respond to market and organizational changes, influence and inform senior leaders, board members, and program directors by giving them a better understanding of how financing and resources are being utilized. It will allow you to drive change throughout the organization. Sage Intacct Planning is the complete planning solution for your organization's success. I'm not going to go line by line on this slide. I wanted to include it to give you a summary of the benefits. You can see here, I believe the benefits that stand out to me are the advanced modeling, what if scenario modeling, and rolling forecasts. But you can see here there is a lot more additional functions that will really help you achieve your goals. Okay. All right, now we're going to go into the demo. I've given you a little bit of an overview, and let me show you the highlights of what we just talked about. Okay. All right, so right now I am logged into the Sage Intacct Planning tool, and I am in what's called the dashboards, and you can see that there are some menus here up on top, and it's, I guess, like I said earlier, very intuitive. I want to mention a couple of things before I go into the functionality. You can have multiple budgets, and you can see here, if I click here on the upper left-hand side, you can see all the different budgets that I have. You can have as many of these budgets as you wish. You can almost think of it as an Excel document because you can have all these budgets. And if you're deciding to practice and you don't like it, you can delete it, create a new one. It's very easy to do. Getting started is really easy. You can have a budget in a few minutes. All of the dimensions that you have in your Sage Intacct core will come through when you create your first budget. So you'll have that opportunity to do that. What we're looking at here again is the dashboards. And what you'll see here throughout the software here, this tool, is that there's always going to be an opportunity to filter the information that you want to see that's more specific to you. And so don't get hung up on, you can see here, there's departments, funds, projects, and grants. This is geared towards nonprofit, but depending on what organization, who you are and what type of dimensions you have, all of those dimensions will be reflected here, and you'll be able to filter on the information that's pertinent to you or to the user. Okay. It's easy enough to create a new budget, a new dashboard, excuse me. If I want to add a new dashboard, I can simply click on this button. I can also add additional widgets, which give me some additional information about what I'm looking for if it's pertinent to me. Okay, very easy to do. I also want to mention while I'm up here is this little tool here up on the right-hand side where I am able to connect to Sage Intacct. And once I click it, and let me go ahead and just log in real quick, you'll have the opportunity to either import actuals from Sage Intacct, or you can export your budget back into Sage Intacct. Okay, and so easy to do. Once you hit next, it'll guide you. There'll be a wizard that guides you through the functions. And like I said earlier, to create a budget, it's easy enough to you can create your first budget in a few minutes by just taking some data from your Sage Intacct core, whether it's last year or this year's actuals, whatever you're working with, you can do that. And for those of you who have Excel and maybe have your budgets in Excel at the moment, you can also use an import or import tool that allow you to get that information in there as well. Okay. Okay. Now, once you're in here, I also want to mention how easy it is to share a budget. On the upper right-hand corner here, I can show you if I click on share, there's a new box that appears that I can type in the email address, and then I can give them the opportunity to either view or modify the budget. And what I love about this is that there's also an advanced feature here that will allow you to limit some of the information that you might not want them to see. This is my favorite, excluding lines. So if you have a budget and you don't want to include people's salaries or something like that, you can go ahead, choose the item that you want to exclude, and then when that person gets an invitation to view this budget, the information that you've excluded will not be available for them to either view or modify. Okay, so very easy to do in terms of sharing. You'll also notice that throughout the system, there'll be these information icons, which will give you information about this specific function, excuse me. And in some places, you might even see a little play button, which will have a little video about how this function works. Okay, and you'll see those throughout the tool. Okay. All right, so once the budget goes back into Sage Intacct, I want to show you this piece too, because I also logged into my Sage Intacct core environment just to show you that once the budgets are in here, now I am in Sage Intacct, and if I just navigate to my budgets and I go to my budget repository, I can see all of the budgets that I brought into the system. Okay, so once they're in here, now you've got the power of Sage Intacct Core Financials to use the reporting, the custom reporting, where you can add columns and have different budgets in there. So if you want a board approved budget, or you've got modified budgets and you want to include them all in one report, it's easy enough to do. I'll show you here. I'll take you to an analysis here, dashboards, where you can simply, if I'm looking at a particular, in this case, my statement of revenues and expenditures, I can simply click on edit. And now if I go to my columns here, I can see now that my operating budget, I can change which budget, and now you'll see all of those budgets that we showed you earlier that were available in the repository. Okay, so now you can get real creative about how you want to see those budgets and utilize the tool to get you all the information that you need. Hit cancel here. And I also want to show you here, I'm going to show you on another budget. Once you're in here, you can also, if it's a blue link here, which means it's a hyperlink, I can simply click on a particular line item in my Sage Intacct Core, and then click on further. Notice that by clicking there, it actually opened up another tab here where it's taken me back into Sage Intacct Planning to give me information about that particular item. Okay, so it is connected. Once it's connected, you'll be able to go back and forth. You also can have multiple budgets again available. Depending on how you're working on this, you can see them all in one place while you're working in it. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back into my Sage, and now I'm going to show you in the Sheets area here. This is where all the reporting happens. Now, again, I just mentioned that the reporting, most of the reporting that you're going to do is going to be in the Sage Intacct Core Financials, but we have some reports that are available here. You've got your cash reports, your P&L, balance sheet, bookings, headcount, and another one for models. So you can see here information, and again, just like we saw on the dashboards, I've got the opportunity to go ahead and filter the information that's more specific to me. So if I'm a program director and I want to see a specific fund, I can do that. I can just choose that, and then all the information for that particular fund will be available for me to see. Okay, I can also expand all of this and see how much further it goes down. So this is my budget tree, and I can see all the information the way that I want to see it. Okay, you can also do budget versus actuals here. So if I want to look at my actuals versus my budget, and then I've got my variance columns, and I can see that for all the months that are important to me. Okay, all right. The next thing I'm going to show you is in the inputs area, because this is kind of like where I feel like the magic happens. Once your budget is in the Sage Intacct Planning tool, on the left-hand side here, we can see all the items. Again, we can expand each one of them. And as you keep expanding, depending on how your Sage Intacct Core dimensions are set up, they'll be reflective here. You'll have an opportunity to choose how you want them broken out. And once they're here, you can see them, and you can see here that I can keep on drilling down further to get to the particular items. Okay. And if, for example, let's say I can see here in this particular case, this is by department, and I can see these different departments: counseling, youth center, food service, outreach, accounting, all of those, again, depending on what you have in your Sage Intacct Core. Okay. All right. Now let me just show you, for example, if we go into a specific line item, let's say from an expense standpoint, and I'll just choose utilities, for example. Now, this is going to be just a regular basic budget item. And you can see here, there's information about what the title is. You can see that this is the number that's reflected from my general ledger. I can also choose what type of an expense it is. Okay. And this is very important because we have lots of different budget types here. And I'll go through some of them because I think they're really cool. But if we just stick with the expense one for the moment, just to show you that what happens is as soon as you select that type, you'll have an opportunity to choose the information about this particular budget item. And so now this landing page that we're seeing here, I'm able to choose when it occurs, whether it's monthly or it's one time a year, quarterly or annually. I've got the opportunity to choose that. I can also choose the spread, whether it's a different amount each month, or if it's going to be the same amount each month, or if there's a growth percentage, I can choose that as well and put the percentage amount, and then that'll all calculate for me on this budget line item that you see up here on the top. Okay. As I scroll down a little bit more, you'll have an opportunity to choose a date range. So if you're expanding this budget over multiple fiscal years, you can do that simply by just expanding the date range, and you'll have the opportunity to input the data for those particular years. As I keep scrolling down, you'll see items dimensions. And again, your dimensions might be different than what we're looking at here, but whatever your Sage Intacct core reflects, you'll see that here. You'll have the opportunity to do to see them and to allocate them, whether you want to allocate by department or by headcount, or you can potentially just put percentages here and decide that those are the percentages that you want to allocate by. Okay. As I keep scrolling down, if it's an expense, depreciable expense, you can also click here and you'll be able to type in the amounts, the years, the asset type, and the start date, and it'll calculate that depreciation over that period. Okay. This is down here. This is very important where it says advanced cash and recognition, because people always ask about cash forecasting. And why this is important is that if I simply click on this, this will give me an opportunity to provide the information that I want to use in order to either recognize this revenue, or when I want to pay it, or when the expense is recognized. And I can put that, and that information will be reflective and will be able to give me a cash forecast depending on how these percentages are done. So you can do cash forecasting. That's a question that always comes up. It is guided through this function here from the P&L account. So you do have to decide which accounts affect them, and then you'll have to come in here and decide that what percentages they're going to be recognized over what period, and then you'll have a proper cash flow that will help you get your job done. Okay. Then down here, you've got your comments. This is a threaded comments. And so if you are sharing the budget with someone, this is great because they can go ahead and put in their comments. And then when someone else looks at it, you can see the supporting detail of why they chose these particular amounts. And that will be available as a threaded comment. I also want to show you that, remember when I showed you a few minutes ago about sharing the budget here as a whole on the upper right-hand corner here, but you can also just share a specific department. So in this case, if I have my counseling department here and all of the information that's related to that, I can simply choose this particular department and say that I want to share this, and I'll get that same look that we saw earlier, except that now notice that it says sharing just counseling services. And again, I type in the email address, give them opportunities to view or modify. And then again, if there are items within that particular department that I don't want them to see or exclude, I can simply come in here and exclude those items as well. Okay. So from that perspective, I think it works really well, especially if you're using Excel and you're always worried about sharing that information, maybe about salary or something else. This is all in here. You never have to do that. It's all going to be available, and you can exclude the lines that you wish to exclude. Okay. All right. So I'm going back into the inputs area because I do want to show you a couple more things here. I mentioned this. I'm going to just come up back here by that expense. I want to show you ones that I love here. So there's a few of them. There's one that, for example, there's a per new employee expense. So let's say you're gearing up for a particular program, and there's going to be inevitably like some expenses that are related to new employees. Well, you can create a category or an expense item that says, well, every time we hire a new employee, there are these expenses that are related to that we should make sure that we include. Well, you can create a line item that says, okay, whenever there's a new employee, it'll know and say, okay, well, you got a new employee starting, and we know that they're going to need a new laptop, or they're going to, need home office equipment or whatever. You can include those items in here and have them be part of the budget so that there's no way that you'll miss them. Okay. Another one that I really like is a derived expense. This is one of my favorites as well. So let's just say, for example, insurance. And let's say that the idea is that our insurance expense is going to be related to some sort of other item. So you can see here, as I select my item, the landing page changes from that expense that we saw a moment ago. And now I've got an opportunity, instead of saying, put the amounts in, it's saying calculate using what? And I can simply click down here and say that, okay, well, maybe I want to base this on salaries, or maybe I want to base it on contributions. And then I can put in the percentage, just say 2%. And then all of a sudden now I have gotten this expense related to this. Now, it doesn't have to be insurance, but maybe consulting expenses that could be related to things like that, or in this case, development, if it was contributions, any of that type of things and so when you update the actual, in this case, the contributions number, the derived expense item will also get updated based on that information. So again, this is a great way to capture that information, that if you're doing this in Excel, you always have to remember all of these things. And once you set this up this way and it's done for you, you can sort of like, set it and forget about it. So it's a great way to manage those kinds of things. Okay. And there is another one which I'm going to take you through from a different way. Is there's also an expense from a model, okay, which we're going to talk to in a moment. The other thing that I want to just show you is if I go back up here, let me go back to let's say, if I want to create, let's say, a salaries or expenses or things like that. Now, when you create salaries, here we go. Let's say I'm picking an employee here that you can see here that starts in March. There's no amount for January and February. I can put in the information, the role. So this information again is going to come over from your Sage Intacct core, from the employee records. So you'll have that opportunity to see these in detail here, which again won't be in your general ledger, but as a whole, because it'll all roll up to your salary and wages accounts. So here I've got the opportunity to choose information about the role and employee ID, base salary, benefits, percentage, employment taxes, anything like that, yearly increases. All those things are things that you can record. There's also an opportunity to do advanced benefits, where in this case, I created something that's just called a sign-on bonus. And now you can see here, if I just expand this total benefits, I can see that there's a benefits line, there's a taxes line, and then there's also a sign-on bonus line. Great way to manage your employees. And with this particular function on the employee level, we also have a table section here where you can manage all of your employees in one area. So if you are used to doing it from an Excel perspective and you don't want to go through the tree, you can actually just do it from here. You can add employees here on the upper right-hand side. Again, just fill in the information that's important. And then that information, once it's mapped, it'll roll up to your, in this case, your salary and wages line. Okay. I'm going to go back to the main for a moment because I want to show you one more thing on this side. All of this that I'm showing you here, again, these are the landing pages for it, but we also have an opportunity to do a grid entry. So you can see here on this upper right-hand side, if I click on here, I can see all of the budgets in a, like an Excel format, if you will. And if there are some changes that I want to make, I can simply go into the boxes and go ahead and change them from this perspective as well. Okay, so you can do it from either way. Whichever is easier for you. We just recently created this view, so we want to make sure that we provide you with enough opportunities to make changes to your budgets as easily as you need to. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to show you is that other line item that I said, which was an expense that was derived through a model. And again, this is where what I've shown you up till now is kind of like just some things that are in Excel, right? You can do all of that in Excel. But this is where I think that everything, this is what takes it to that next level, that FP&A that I talked about, being able to see beyond just the budget, budget to actual, and seeing and trying to figure out things that, either responding to market changes or just organizational changes. That's what allows you to do with this modeling area here. And I'll just show you here if you're a membership organization, you can simply create your assumptions. And the idea is that you have these assumptions where, in this case, you've got membership levels and the amounts that are level of each membership level. And then down here, you can use these as calculations and say, okay, well, I'm expecting, this many members for this particular month. And so you can input these. And so these are things that you can input. And so in terms of changes that you wish to make, you just come in here. I can click on this little edit button, and I can either, again, choose that same amount, or I can choose various amounts where I can just simply type in the amounts that I'm looking for, and it will go ahead and populate them for me. Okay. And again, I've got that opportunity to also use the dimensions if I need to allocate them by in a certain group or fund or project or grant. Any of that is available here. Okay. I'm not going to save this. But I do want to just show you also that once you have created that, and so for example, you've got these input numbers where you gone ahead and made those changes, then you've got your revenue item down here, which is another model line that says, okay, well, you see how, first of all, it says that it's linked, which means that I've linked it to a particular budget line. And so what this one really is saying is that, okay, well, how much is my revenue for this particular level? Based on, how many members I have. And so I've got a calculation where I'll show you here. Look at this membership. And I've just basically have said that, hey, take this membership assumption and multiply it by the membership, the amount of members that I'll have. And then it'll calculate that number for me. So I could use this sort of like in an Excel where you can see you've got all these opportunities to use these formulas, so you can get as creative as you wish. Okay. And then once that is done, you have that opportunity to add it to the budget. And this is where you just simply click on here and you can choose the item where you want this to this item to be merged to. Okay. So that when I update those members, my assumptions, or just change any of the amounts, for example, if let's say I want to raise the membership by a certain percent, what does that do to my budget? And you can easily do that and have that be connected and see how that rolls into your overall budget. Okay. I'm going to save. Okay, and then I just want to show you another model because I want to be inclusive of everyone that's here. But I love this piece here because it just, you can get so creative about how to use these models. I've got another one here just from like the client's serve perspective. So let's say we've got a counseling, we've got an assumption that's cost per hour. We also have, case management, for example, and that would be a cost. And then just like we saw above on the membership, I can say, well, how many clients do I expect to serve on these particular months? And then, how do I get that cost? So my counseling cost is going to be, one of these model lines multiplied by one of these assumptions. And then I can easily make some changes and see how these items affect my budget. Okay. So you can really get creative with these models, because again, I think this is what takes this budgeting and takes it to that FP&A function that I'm talking about, where you're not just looking at the budget that you did last fiscal year for this fiscal year. You can do this every week. You could spend a couple of hours there where you're actually looking ahead and trying to respond to these market changes or anything else, and especially with grants, and we never know how many we're going to get and how many we're going to lose. And so all of these things need to be agile, need to be changed, or need to be flexible, if you will, to allow you to change. Okay. All right. And so the next thing is, this is also my favorite here, because not only can you make these changes into these models, but there's also this opportunity to do scenarios. So I can go ahead and create a new scenario. I've actually created one here where I can just say state grants. And what this does is when you create a new scenario, it takes a complete copy of your existing budget, puts it in another area, if you will, where you now are able to make some changes to it. So in the case of where I remember my CEO would always ask, okay, well, what happens if we get this grant? What will this do to our budget? Well, I can simply take a copy of this, create a scenario, say, okay, well, if we get this grant, this is how much more revenue we're going to get, but this is how much more it's going to cost us in terms of resources, and have that as be part of the budget. And then we can keep that on the side for a while. And then when we do get it approved, or we get the grant, then we can simply just merge the budget. So I can just, once I have that, I have the opportunity to merge it with my budget so that it becomes part of my working budget. So you can create these scenarios and see what they look like. I also like to do this from the perspective of, remember how I said in Sage Intacct Core that you can have many columns with many different budgets? Well, you can also create these budgets with these different scenarios, push them over into Sage Intacct Core, and have them be all in one spreadsheet that says, okay, well, this is what happens if we do this, and you can see it all in one sheet versus having to keep going back and forth. Especially if you're using Excel, it's going to be difficult to make those changes in a timely fashion. Okay, so this is a great tool. Also, the changes that you see here, once you have created the scenario, we can go back to our sheets area, and I can say here, let's say I want to do my state grants versus my budget. So now I can see this even before I push it over into Sage Intacct Core. I can see here that, oh, okay, well, these are all the changes that are happening based on my new assumption, or on this new scenario. I can see it right here. I can see my overall, I can see it by month, and then my overall difference is going to be here. These are the changes that you can see, okay, throughout the budget. And again, I can expand all of these items to see where those items were coming from. Okay, in this case, you can see here that there's a new state grant, and it was $1.5 million, and I can see that. And if there were any changes, like for example here, there's another one that's related to that. That would be new costs related to this. You'd see that here as well. Okay, so very easy way to do that. And you can create multiple scenarios. You're not just limited to one. So you can have a worst case, you can have 2 worst case, or 5 best case scenarios, as many as you wish, and you keep on using them and really just modifying them in a way so that you're always being proactive as opposed to reactive to any changes that happen in your business. Okay. All right. The other thing I want to show you here is that if I go back to my inputs, I'm going to just get out of here. I also want to show you 2 things. There's a history tab here, which allows you to create a forecast. So you can just simply decide if, let's say this is going to be my May 2023 forecast. I can simply choose that. Okay, and add it, and now that will be this particular item. Like, so we basically took a snapshot of this and forecast that allow me to come back later on. And you can see here there's all these auto saves, but that's auto save. But if you ever want to go back, you simply click on this little arrow here to switch to that particular version, and it'll take you back to that to see what you did, or look at the information that you're looking for. Okay, so very easy to do to create those forecasts. I do just want to show you one other thing. I'm going to go to another database here because I want to show you the cash flow. I think I mentioned, I worked for a nonprofit that was very government heavy on the government funding. And so we always had cash flow issues. And so that was always a problem, because we had to spend our money first, and then we would get reimbursed 2-3 months later. And so managing the cash was a real issue for me. And so what I love about this is that you can, using that function that I showed you earlier, if I go to my sheets area, this is where you'll be able to see the cash. And what I did here was I put some expenses out that were in my January budget, but I used that percentage function to say that I was going to pay it in my February. And so you can see here that, okay, well, I've got these expenses, but I'm not going to pay them until February. And so that will give me that cash balance total on the bottom. Okay, so this is a great way if you are managing cash from that perspective, like I had to do. This is going to be the tool that will help you manage it better. Okay, because you'll be able to put in the amounts of when you're expecting to be reimbursed, as opposed to just the revenue expense and the actual payment of expenses. You'll be able to manage that in a way that's a little more useful and just be proactive and managing your cash. Okay. All right, let me look at my notes here, make sure that I've covered everything. Modeling, actuals, okay. I also just want to mention that, if you're working with the budget throughout the month, let's say right now we're in the month of May and we're already working in this fiscal year, you can always click on this button that I showed you earlier where I can export or import connected to my Sage Intacct. I can simply click on that. It'll allow me to sign in, and I'll bring in the data from, let's say in this case, it would be from January through April 30th, and then and it'll forecast the rest for me, so that again, I have another opportunity to look at how I'm doing and how I'm going to end up. So there's never any surprises because you're looking at this budget constantly. Okay. All right. So I guess I'll finish off with just saying this is that, think about it. If you ever had to do this in the past using Excel, you would have had so many different versions of your budget. I still laugh when I think about how I used to have to compile all these different worksheets in Excel, and then I had to name them: operating budget, final, version 2, revision 6. That was a nightmare. This is a great benefit of having it all in one source of truth. And so, you know, to reiterate the benefits of using Sage Intacct Planning, as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer. The real-time collaboration with key stakeholders, giving them the opportunity to take responsibility for how they're spending on their budget, increasing the trust, providing greater agility, to respond to business and market changes, and have that single source of truth is groundbreaking, as my 10-year-old niece would say. So, folks, this is supposed to be a high-level demo. I hope that I enticed you enough to be more curious about how this tool can help you with your budgeting and planning functions. Please reach out to your partner with questions and next steps. And I haven't been looking at any of the questions, but I'm hoping that my team has answered all your questions. But
Yes. Hey, Sal, it's Craig here.
Yes.
There is one question, if we can just touch on. The budget that you've been demoing and showing here is just for 12 months. What if a customer wants to do a multi-year budget?
So when you create a budget in the beginning, there's an opportunity to actually expand the dates, just like the way that you would do here. If I go back to my main and pick a specific item, let me go back to my item here. So down here, if I want to expand it, I can go ahead and do that and choose the year that I want to do. So while I'm showing you this at the line item level, when you create a budget through the wizard, you will have an opportunity to choose a period of time. Usually it's a fiscal year, but you can choose anytime you want, and it could be multiple fiscal years.
That's great. There was one other question that I'll answer for everybody else as well, and that was about whether you could automate the synchronization of actuals from Sage Intacct. As I posted on the chat, that's not currently possible. So as Sal demonstrated, you do have to manually import those actuals once a month, once they're updated. It is on the roadmap for it to be automated. I don't have a timeline for that yet, but when it's due, we will be letting everybody know.
Yeah, and like I said, I've done this a couple of times. It doesn't take long to start a budget. It actually is very quickly. It takes, I think, 3 minutes. I timed it where to start the budget, and it probably takes 10 minutes for you to integrate during the year. But also, again, let's just keep in mind, depending on how big your budget is and how many line items, that can play a role too. But it's easy enough to do, and it won't lock you out for the whole day. And remember that if you're working with this, because the way that it is, you can actually continue working in another budget, because you can have multiple windows open on that as well. So it's easy enough to manage. It won't prevent you from doing your work like some software will do.
Oh, and one final question, Sal, sorry. Is this recording going to be made available after this session?
Yes. Yes, it will.
And where?
You know, I was going to ask Susan, but Susan, I don't know if you're allowed to talk because I think you're muted. um, uh,
Sounds like the answer is yes, and we'll follow up
yeah,
with
well,
everybody on the call afterwards.
I don't know the answer. I don't know where, but that's why we recorded it so that it is available. We'll make sure that everyone here gets this.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, that's all the questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and your attention today. If you have any questions, please contact your partner for, if you're looking to do another demo that's specific to you, to your organization, please let us know. We're here to help and help you succeed. So thank you so much. Okay. All right. So long, everybody.